Like, we didn't get someone hurt. We didn't make their lives crap. We didn't have a very hostile work environment.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, like, those are extremely simple, intuitive constructs that we fail to miss as our primary responsibility with other people as a coach or a business owner.
Mm-hmm.
And it was abundantly obvious to me that most of the fitness industry is completely preoccupied with things that are just unnecessary and the equivalent of the internet clickbait. Like, how do we grab
Yeah.
attention without really
Yeah.
much to show for it?
Welcome back, Pushin Performance family. It's Phil here, riding solo. But don't worry, I'm only riding solo for the intro and our interview today with Tim Caron. But before we get into all that information, just want to shout out that if you're rocking with the show, you're enjoying it, you're listening every week, please do your boys a massive, massive, massive favor and rate and review on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on. Does us a huge, huge help as far as engagement and listeners go. So, without further ado, this episode ahead is an absolute banger. The privilege of sitting down with Tim Caron, who is the co-founder and head coach at Allegiate right now. But Tim has had incredible impact on me and my philosophy as a coach. And he's had a really, really cool path through strength and conditioning to get where he's at now. He's been an assistant with Georgia Tech and USC football. He was the head strength coach at Army West Point for 9 years before he left the collegiate sector, moved to the private sector, and is now the co-founder and head coach at Allegiate. He also is the performance engineer for Live Momentous Supplements, and he's also an advisor for Realize Me. After this conversation, Tim and I get into his new course, Strength Coach Foundations. We talk about his decision to leave the collegiate sector and move into the private sector and start his own business. We get super deep into his philosophy around program design and assessment, and so much more. So this conversation is super packed with information. And then don't worry, JT's joining me again for his thoughts on Tim's interview with me for the end of the episode to wrap everything all up. So without further ado, let's dive into it. I know y'all are going to love this one. We were talking a little bit before we pressed record about the muscle mentorships, actually, and it got me thinking. I was listening to a podcast of you talking about how the muscle mentorship started and watching Tom Platt's videos on the plane with a couple other coaches. And it's funny, my cousin is like 21 years old, just got into training, obsessed with it, obsessed with like bodybuilding and TikTok and all this stuff. And somehow, I'm not on TikTok. I don't know what the hell is going on over there. But he came across Tom Platt's videos and was like, do you know who this guy is? And like sending me Tom Platt's videos and Klokov training hall videos and all this stuff. So it's like, does that stuff still fire you up? Does that still keep you trying different crazy things?
It's my foundation. And when, I look at who I am as a coach, I wasn't a good athlete. I mean, you realize how bad you are when you're around good athletes.
Yeah.
And then the other part, I don't consider myself this ready-made guy. None of it's born. It's all earned. It's all given. And that's mentality is built in the weight room. And my origin, much like now anyone who precedes the 2000s and starting strength training is probably bodybuilding entry point. And that part is like really foundational for me. If I'm going to say who I am as a strength coach, performance, outcome driven, looking at what's in front of me and trying to find the best path to get that person better or more robust in some ways. But I'd be lying to say that the back of my mind, I wasn't in a Gold's Gym in 1997 doing a body part split, doing fasted cardio, trying to get as big and as muscular and as lean as humanly possible. I mean, I was fanatical at a very young age. I mean, I was 13, tracking all my macros, doing my calories, doing a 5-day split. really trying to accentuate that to the point where it became disruptive to the teams I was on. I mean, I have football, basketball, track and field, baseball, and it would always be like, I'm not here to play sports. I am lifting weights and bodybuilding, and you guys are just a distraction for an hour or two once a day. And then the next level is like I would get jobs, and all of it was my dad saying, "I'm not buying all these supplements for you." So I'd get part-time jobs just to buy different supplements. And
Yeah.
I mean, I remember going to GNC and saying, okay, well, I need this. How do I get that? So I would just go out there and get these part-time jobs, knowing in the back of my mind, as soon as I made enough money, I was going to quit. And all of that was who I am. And I'm still that to this day. And
Yeah.
yes, I'm a little bit more thoughtful about my programming, and I'm not as violent with counting every single one of my calories and every day doing that. But if I was going to tell you like the genesis of muscle mentorship and the showing the clips of Tom Platz or even Warrior teaching people how to squat, that kind of thing. And like showing that to the other strength coaches, knowing I'm trying to get an idea of what their response or reaction to that be. If they're like, "Oh my God, what an idiot!" I'm like, "Oh yeah, he's an idiot," or "Wow, that's really interesting." Like, yeah, it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm trying to get a feel for what's people tolerance and acceptance to my backstory, and
Yeah.
that I got an opportunity, a platform with muscle mentorship to really quote unquote show myself and who I am and show my
Mhm.
authentic version of myself. And,
Yeah.
thankful and I'm appreciative that the best version of me or my most authentic version is accepted. And but it wasn't always the case, right? And there's a lot of really great books about the history of physical culture and strength training and
Mhm.
all that. But a large part of our existence is this taboo counterculture, isolated, type of thought. And, I
Yeah.
felt that, like alienating your friends for not going out on a Thursday or Friday because you got to get a 6 a.m. fasted cardio the next morning, or you're
Yeah.
not going out to eat because you're not going to bring a Tupperware to every single meal when you go out to eat. The
Yep.
getting made fun of, like, how many calories is in this all through high school and college? Like, 432, and there's 20 grams of protein and 40 grams of carbs and 8 grams of fat. Like, yeah, that was me. And I am still that person to my core. And
Mhm.
I just try to temper that based off of the audience in front of me. And that was muscle mentorship in a lot of ways. It's just letting myself completely be vulnerable and exposing all the truisms that I've developed over my years. And that it was fun. It was definitely a great experience.
So you mentioned almost going out of your way to like maybe not find people who all like fully disagree with you, but you're seeking alternate perspectives around training, around the things that you're learning, and not just going to conferences where it's like the same people, the same stuff, the same message, and resenting this like learning one thing piece of when you put it in the like the frame of an investment, like you said, that's a pretty terrible investment. So like for a younger coach in the field, like how do you recommend them going about that same process and like finding these things that are outside of their comfort zone and outside of what they know?
Yeah. Actually, I'm coming out with a course on what I'm calling coaching foundations. And
Mm,
the central message is going to be, what do you want and why do you want it?
mm,
The generic why, right? But the question I ask and why I ask that is, a lot of people give you what they consider the answer you want to hear. I
mm,
want to help people, or, I want to be part of a team, or, I've always aspired to be in competitive athletic environments. Like, it's a very generic scripted answer. And
yeah.
you realize they're trying to get a feel for what you want to hear, as opposed to, no, I genuinely need to know what you want to do, right? Because
Mm,
I've been in multiple situations, from the team setting to the private setting, and you have this like song and dance from your coaches and staff of what they want to accomplish, and they're trying to like maybe architect an answer that's relative to what they think you want to hear. And it's
mm,
like, well, if I'm gonna really like leverage you, and not to treat this as transactional, but when I hire you as a coach, or when you're working for me as a coach, there is I need you to do these basic things, and I need to have a really dialed in job description. And hey, Phil, great to meet you. Do you have these prerequisite skills to execute this job? That's important. And most employers do a really crappy job of setting up the constructs of what a job is, right? So that
Yeah.
that part is, I got to take ownership there. And the other end of it, it's, hey, I want to be this or I want to do that, right? So I have a private gym with focuses on general populations, and they'll tell me I just want to work with Gen Pop and I want to help people. But they're constantly emailing colleges and pro teams as an intern. And it's like, just tell me you want to
Yeah.
work in the team sector. And for me, I'm going to have you for this period of time. I can help you in getting accessibility to that or giving you the foundational tools to be a really good strength coach that would apply to that. But in exchange for that, you need to do a really good job. And I know
Yeah.
what motivational levers to pull if I know what your true intentions are, right? The thinking that I'm asking you a question and you're going to give me an answer and there's a hidden meaning behind that. This, like, we're not courting each other. We're not playing games. I need you to do a job to essentially keep my business going and to provide a high quality service. And in exchange for that, whatever true intentions you have, I'm going to facilitate that and help that for you. Right. But we need to have a
Mhm.
very honest start. So the foundation of the course is, what do you want? Right. Like, and I
Mm.
think there's probably going to be a couple vectors, right? I want to work in the team setting, or I want to work with athletes. I want to have a high notoriety, very influential position. I want to do public speaking and writing. There's all these like vectors and these career paths that we can take in performance and strength conditioning. And a lot of it's based off these archetypes that we've been creating, right? The
Mhm.
elite level performance coach that has professional athletes banging down their door to go find them, right? That has a very aspirational view of it, right? And we all know
Yeah.
the pains of that, right? Like, I could tell you firsthand, that's not the easiest thing, and you have to present a status and a symbol of who you are more so than
Mhm.
actually that. But when it gets to the point of, like, let's just use that example. I want to work with elite level athletes in a combine setting, right?
Mm.
The notion that you need to go to a boatload of conferences to become more apt and capable to facilitate that higher profile client. The truth is, it's probably a huge mistake, right?
Mm.
I don't need to know more about biomechanics and physiology or anything that goes into performance and whatsoever. What I do need to know is how to sell myself, market myself, present myself in a way that's aspirational to that person that might be a high net worth. And that's a
Yeah.
fundamental difference. So if you're going
Mm.
to ask me, like, hey, I want to work with elite level combine athletes in that January to April period, and I want to have a lot of notoriety and recognition around that, I want to do a lot of public speaking. Okay, well, learn the fundamentals, right? You need to have some sort of skill to be a strength coach, and it's
Mm.
probably pretty easy to acquire those skills. But if you're going to double down and lean harder in that and be a strength conditioning nerd, you're probably actually not helping yourself.
Shit, there was a lot of awesome stuff in that. Like, I think I can't tell you how many job interviews I've done where it's like, I just want to help people. And it's like, there's more to it than that, and that's okay. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know why our industry has to be this like purely selfless thing. Like, we can have wants and needs and all that as coaches too. But you mentioned, like, all right, the head strength coach is the goal until you hit head strength coach and you're like, oh shit, maybe this isn't everything. Like, now it's business owner. So, like, two questions in that. Like, what was the thing that sparked that change for you? And then when you made the change, how did that impact your whole coaching philosophy now, going from working with athletes at Army West Point to then now working with members of the general population?
I would say probably look around and see how many people past the age of 40 in college strength conditioning exist,
Yeah.
at least in leadership roles.
Hmm.
So it became an economic decision of, okay, well, what's the timeline here that I can make this money that I'm making, and what is the opportunity after a certain age, right? The
Mm.
odds of becoming or staying as a head strength coach past the age of 50. There's a lot of strategy, but there's also a lot of circumstance and luck. Uh, I just essentially thought, okay, well, if I'm gonna have control over this, and there's a lot of back pay associated with college strength conditioning. So GA is supposed to make $8,000 in that year. I think they only paid me for one semester, and since I left a year early, like, they never really paid it. So whatever, $4,000. First job, 32. Second year, I got bumped up to 35. Third year, I ended up leaving at 38. And then USC 50. And then 2 years of that got bumped up to 60. 2 years of that. And these are living in Atlanta and LA, and that doesn't go very far. So it wasn't I was living within my means, and you're able to use their resources, but it wasn't like I was saving money to buy a house or anything like that. And then Army West Point, making 125. We were bad. Years 1, year 2. No bonuses, no raises, nothing, right? So the 125 was good, and I still think it's a good salary. Obviously, that's changed a lot in the last 8 years, but the ability to earn in the future with more expenses coming down the pipe with a family and kids coming was really on top of my mind. And the feeling of I had no control over that, like the process. And I'm fortunate and grateful for the opportunity to be a head strength coach, but the process of becoming a head strength coach wasn't necessarily in line with the developing of my skill or being really good at my job. It was more along the lines of, it just was a good fit from personalities and alignment of where we were at professionally between me and the head strength coach. But if a head strength coach were to leave, head football coach were to leave, I probably wouldn't be guaranteed an opportunity to go or stay. If we were to get fired, my opportunities would be potentially lessened. I felt like I have a pretty good network in strength and conditioning that I kind of probably could have picked myself back up and find another college job, but it would be at a much significantly less compensation. And those opportunities over time, they dwindle when your network shrinks, right? So the more you're out of place, the more your network and your proverbial reach shrinks down, and more people get inserted in the field, and those opportunities get taken up. So there's more people willing to take less money, and then there's less opportunities at higher ranking positions, and then your network shrinks. It was a really economic decision of I had very little control and less opportunity every single year. And then the other aspect of opening up a gym was this idea of, well, what would it be like if I was completely in charge, or if it really fell onto me and, my high and mighty stance of my training is superior to others, but I'm hiding behind, maybe we just have better resources or better coaches or just luck of talent, I guess. It's a really hard thing to say of your contribution is more than someone else's versus a actual physical business where people tell you if you're better based off their willingness and consistency of paying you. It's a pretty clear, cause and effect of your quality of being compensated directly for your skill and your ability versus the college strength conditioning environment. And I like to think of myself as really good, but there's really no test to indicate that, right? The top 50 college strength coaches is a very interesting poll based off of criteria that no one seems to know. Same thing with like grading colleges, right? Like, what's the best institution for business? Like, it's a very loose science, and it's extremely, it's like a bodybuilding show, like preference and the whatever the association or bias like with the way something looks or acts or that part for me became harder and harder to really realistically say that I wanted to be a part of that, where the private business, it's almighty P&L or profit and loss, is the true indicator if you're good. And I wanted that, to be honest. I wanted to bet on myself and believe that, okay, if I'm really good, it should work out really fine, and to prove that. And, I'm fortunate enough where my good was good enough, and we've had a business going for us our 8th year, and we have 3 locations. So that part really was I guess confirmation of that. But the other note, or the other question you had in terms of how did I adjust my training, other than I really wouldn't say anything, to be honest. Like, I training's training, man. Like, it's the same physiology for an elite level athlete and underlying mechanisms to change someone. The outcome is different. That would be the only thing. But I'm always a outcome, not a solution guy. I don't really care about exercise selection. Like I find it hysterical, just the aggressive, overly associating with methods and protocols and
Yeah.
exercises as cause or means to change something. It's grasping at straws. It doesn't really like it's a silly thought that there's a world out there on social media and a world that's just overly preoccupied with the what you can do and not the why or how. And
Mhm.
I think that's either a big asset for me, and it's a slow build, but once you prove a high efficacy of training and a very high value from what you do, it's
Mhm.
pretty easy. Just we're living in a world of mediocrity and people that are completely completely like consumed with things that are just trivial and unnecessary. And you're like,
Yeah.
just be good. Just don't be an idiot. Don't suck. Uh, and you're probably going to be ahead of a lot of people. You know, it's just go on the internet and learn exactly what not to do. And I think it goes into another concept of I'm a business owner. I own and operate a business with several coaches and several people going through on a daily basis
Mhm.
that are relying on me to make really smart choices from protecting them, not getting them hurt, but getting them better. And
Yeah.
coaches are relying on me to give them the prerequisite tools and knowledge and incentives, whether it's compensation or just support or education to help them do their job. Because at the end of the day, you know, we go home, we eat dinner, we go to bed, and that process that happened all before that hopefully isn't net negative, right? Like we didn't get someone hurt, we didn't make their lives crap, we didn't have a very hostile work environment. You know,
Yeah.
generally speaking, like those are extremely simple, intuitive constructs that we fail to miss as our primary responsibility with other people as a coach or a business owner.
Mhm.
And it was abundantly obvious to me that most of the fitness industry is completely preoccupied with things that are just unnecessary and um, the equivalent of the internet clickbait. Like, how do we grab
Yeah.
attention without really
Yeah.
much to show for it? And there's fine trainers, there's good personal trainers, there's good gyms, there's good strength coaches working as in a private industry. But as a whole, if we're looking at there's let's just say 30,000 gyms in California,
Mhm.
how many of them are good? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I would argue if you're just slightly better than average, you should be able to make it. And then it gets into the next level of, all right, well, then you just got to be really consistent with being slightly better than average. And then the next level of, if that's not good enough, how do you be the best? And that part is where I've been really focusing on the past, you know, after we got through the first year of, you know, I would always tell people, I'm like, I know we're better. You know, like you don't believe
Yeah.
it, but I know we are.
Yeah.
And then that's where my motivation comes in of like this constant drive for the pursuit of perfection and excellence and having a business that is transformational for not only their staff but the people that pay for it. And that part has been really exciting. But to answer your question, like how have I changed philosophy wise? Like if anything, I've doubled down on things that I know are true and just focus on that more because it's a differentiator. It really is.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I love that. I think I love that people are going to like coaches are going to hear that because I think a lot of coaches who work on either side and have never crossed the aisle, so to speak, they think it's like this weird dichotomy when we're all human beings and like it's doesn't have to be that different. But you talked on touched on a couple like big things in there, like talking about how can we like objectively show outcomes when a lot of different gyms are just like it's just fun and good vibes. We're just hanging out. Like that's what we're doing. That's what we're selling, and we're not like tangibly making any meaningful improvements. And I know coaches struggle with, how do we kind of objectively show what we do for members of the general population? So now, with what you do at Allegiate, I know you do it on a couple different scales, but like, how do you go about one, showing you're objectively getting better, and then two, like getting them bought into that and getting them fired up about that aspect?
I think we got to address a fundamental issue with not having testing or baseline testing or reoccurring
Yeah.
testing. A lot of
Yeah.
it's based off the premise that the whole entire industry is extremely high churn. It is
Hmm.
class pass, it's concepts that are very similar that encourage and enable people to never really actually see what a program can do. And with that comes a very transient audience that never really has to accomplish anything, right? It's the metaphor is a hamster spinning on a wheel. They're just doing it on different wheels. They're not going anywhere. They're just occupying space and time with a different brand or a different part of town over and over and over again. And they have very little to show for it. And that part becomes extremely important, that if you are putting your flag in the sand saying that we are superior in every way, you actually have to tangibly show what you do that's better. And unless you're committing to testing, and unless you're committing to knowing that, you're going to get caught in a very violent and dangerous game of high churn, increased marketing expenses, increased focus on getting new customers, and alienating your current customers because it's always next person up. And if you are a person that values your contribution to others, and I'm not saying that there are bad intentions at concepts that are essentially like new lead focus. They're not doing this with malicious intent. I think everyone's going with this, the pretense that we want to help. The problem is when you say it's all about having a great first touch point or first great experience and scaling your product to that potential new person and organizing your thing to have a really good, enthusiastic ramp of high energy, high enthusiasm, easily attainable exercises, very, very digestible training methods that's understandable to everybody. You're setting yourself up for they're going to master what you do quickly and not have much to show for it, and they're just going to do the same thing somewhere else. So you better be good at keeping people's attention, and it's a part of it. Community aspect is huge, and it's something I've had to really adjust and learn. But you find them having to resort to stuff outside the gym and stuff that's supportive to the whole life, right? And if I'm looking at myself of like my value prop to my customers is I have an extreme knowledge base and strength conditioning and performance enhancement and reduction of injuries, that if you are going to ask me to hang out, get a beer, or do something outside of the gym, I'm probably going to tell you I'm not very interesting and I'm not that compelling of a person. And you really don't need me as a friend. You probably have way more people in your life that you would have a better connection with. Not saying I'm not flattered and honored, but if that's the really only value prop I have over time, I did a really poor job of understanding the assignment and having a business that gets great results. And great results is relative to that person. A lot of times you have to nudge them to actually want to accomplish something. And that's the other element is we've conditioned people to not really value what they get from the time and the money they put into fitness. You look at it from just systemically, right? North America, we could say the health fitness supplement industry is $1 trillion business. And here we are facing an absolute epidemic of obesity, metabolic syndrome, cardiovascular disease, all sorts of chronic lifestyle related diseases, but no shortage of investment, right? Americans are committing that thousands of dollars annually to their health and fitness, and we have netted what? And if we are the ambassadors of preventative-based health problems, the gyms, the brick and mortars, the places going to work every single day, maybe provide online, and collectively we're all part of this thing that's supposed to prevent that stuff and limit that stuff and derail that. Like there's been a exponential rise in commercial fitness in terms of profitability and chronic disease. They've been going in a linear relationship. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't actually add up. When you start to look at the organization and you start to look at, well, how do you become successful? It's okay. We got to get new leads. We got to get more business. Well, what about your current customers? What are they getting from what the money and time they invested? They usually go to a similar concept just down the road. So I'm always on to the next person. That's survival mode. Most of us businesses are doing that. We're always fighting for new leads. I do it every day. I'm still focused on the only way I can survive is if I get new leads, but not at the expense of our current customers. And it takes a lot of effort to test and fight the good fight. And we're going to come up short a lot. And that's a great opportunity to revisit and take ownership and take responsibility and hold people accountable and push people and have the courage to say the things that need to be said when they need to be said, because that is our job. We have the burden of knowledge of the things that you are doing or not doing is going to have an outcome. And if we don't at least get ahead on that and have some sort of testing as a trigger to talk about those things, then you really aren't doing a service to your clients. And again, no one's doing this with malicious intent and trying to steal or do things that are poor. We open up a gym off the construct of we genuinely want to help. But in the end of the day, if you're not netting anything and you're not committing to it, that's important. That's an important conversation to have. Now, the other end, there's a difference between having a Tim Caron Performance Center, where it's just me at the epicenter and everything runs through me, versus a non-named gym like Allegiate. And when we decided to have a scaled business that's going to have a big reach, a big concentric circle in these small like pockets, part of LA, the notion was, if I'm the only person that can do that actual physical assessment or that test, we're going to fail. And we're committing to the idea of testing and having a high performance outcome. So we needed to find very scalable testing methods that is translatable from me to you to everyone else that will work at Allegiate. And we leaned in a lot of objectivity. What is going to have a low human error element? What's going to have very high reliability? What's going to be very objective over a course of 3 gyms and hundreds of members every single week? And that's why we centered off of things like force plates and Nordic hamstring strength assessments or grip assessments that feed into a cloud. So I don't have to worry about data entry. I don't have to worry about testing procedures. It's pretty cut and dry.
Yeah.
Stand here, wait till it calibrates, jump 3 times, land, next person out. Like it's going to be extremely simple, easy, and intuitive to execute that test. And the information is incredible, right? And I can know off the bat your rate of performance change, your power production, your force production, your level of asymmetry, your predictability, your potentially risk if I put you under a barbell or something else pretty quickly and accurately. And that is a powerful metric. And the same thing with things like body count. Like, is it reliable and valid? And if it's not, okay. Does it have a high human error element? Like, I'm the only person probably at my gyms that could do a skin caliper to the level that I can do it. Doesn't mean that skin caliper is bad. It just means that once we made the commitment to have a scaled business, skin caliper became a less reliable tool, and we needed to find other means. And that's why we use an ultrasound. And the validity component to me is really important. So why we don't use a bioelectrical impedance, because I want to know what regional fat storage is, and I want to know change and when it's coming, where it's coming, and how can we track that over time. But it's also a high human success rate when we start to utilize a tool like that.
Yeah, dude, that's so good. And I think people see force plates and they see NordBoard and they're like, that's not for regular people. Like, they don't need to do that, but they're not taking into account the other end of the spectrum where it's like, this is hard to mess up, and you get pretty great data from it that's actionable.
Yeah, absolutely.
We can do something with it. So absolutely love that message. Want to be mindful of your time though, Tim. I know you got to run, so thank you for popping on. Where can people find you and find more about the education offerings that you have going on?
Coach Tim Caron, IG, same thing on Twitter or X now. And then the other one is phpodcast.com. I just funnel all coaching education to that. So if you want to learn more about my systems, my courses, my books, I got a ton of blogs, ton of podcasts. Podcasts are definitely not an easy listen. It's not like, hey, I'm going to just do a Sunday stroll while listening to Tim rant. You can just tell by the vibe of this that, I'm going to go hard in the paint. So, just strap in, get ready. It's also a membership platform associated with podcasts. So podcast is more of a web show where we're shooting this live and trying to get a really high level information and informative experience. But the membership platform is going to be that, hey, I really want you to get immersed in a growth mindset type of approach to learning and thinking. The courses and the books is that A to B. Hey, I'm all good with the idea that, like, chop wood, carry water, education and learning. I get that. I just need something tangible to show for it. And that's the other half of it. Like, get the courses, get the books. There's a start and a finish. You're not going to be a perfect coach, but you're going to be better. And that's the plan, is to have something for everybody. So phpodcast.com will be a huge resource for that.
Hey, I love it, man. I say Strength Deficit, incredible book. I have been listening to the podcast. I tried to just listen to it, and I was like, you know what? I got to take notes on this. So now I furiously take notes when I listen to the web shows.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been, that's been a journey in itself. So that's a skill. And, that's something too, if you're looking at the Robbie Bork said it best of like, best reason to have a podcast to get high level people on for free consults. But I think about it too, of now I have a really good opportunity to expose myself to topics and things that I have to really think about and talk about. So, just like I was talking about before of, just have the courage to do it and see what happens.
For sure. 1000%. Well, Tim, thank you so much for your time. I'm excited for people to get into this one.
Awesome. Thank you, Phil.
All right, JT, how was it being on the other side and having an opportunity just to listen to Pushin Performance?
Man, this was it was different for one, but I would after listening to the episode with you and Tim, I had major FOMO. I was like, man, I wish I was in that conversation to ask some questions there, but good thing I wasn't, because he went hard. And if I was in there, I would have, interrupted some greatness there. But you ever watch The Office? You watch The Office?
Yeah.
How many times have you watched it?
10?
10?
Yeah, somewhere around there.
So would you agree that every time you do watch The Office, like, you get something new out of it? Like, oh, I didn't see that the first time. So that's how I felt watching or listening to Tim talk. Like, I listened to this at least 6 times.
Yeah.
And every time I listened to it, I was like, man, I got to write that one down. Like, there was a new bar every time I listened to it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's how good it was. And then I think Tim just, I wrote so many notes down, just one of them being, don't focus on being different. And these are not verbatim, but these are something that I took from listening to it.
Yeah, for sure.
We don't need to necessarily focus on being different, but focus on being better. And I think within our industry, we try to stand out to, I don't know, get the likes, get the views, all that stuff within social media, but then we lose our focus on being better. So I think there's two different things that he really goes so hard on, which is very refreshing. I think a lot of the things that he was speaking to was going hard in the details of the significant basics. I wrote this down. I was like, I can't be forgetting this. Right? We talk about basics, we talk about foundations a lot, and he went into the nitty-gritty and the details of those basics, which I really appreciated.
Yeah. No, Tim, like he said, he went hard in the paint. If anyone who's ever listened to any of Tim's other educational material or his podcast, that man's going hard. He's cutting record and he's going hard for 45 minutes to an hour. Like, and it's an insane amount of information. I think of Tim like almost like a modern day Mike Boyle, even though Mike Boyle's still doing a ton of great stuff, but like a great mashup of like anecdotal experience that he's had from years in the field, but also like evidence based and research driven as well. But no, I mean, you were missed. There was a couple times where I'm like sitting there, I'm like, all right, what's JT gonna say? And I'm like, shit, JT's not here. I'm here alone. Okay, let me lock back in here and figure out how I'm gonna respond to this. But no, you talked about the significant basics. You hit on the foundational stuff a ton. But what else jumped out to you as some of your like major takeaways from listening to that convo with Tim?
Grow your network to grow your opportunities. I think that was something that really stood out to me. And we understand the value of networking, but he really goes into the details of how that could potentially bring you luck or bring you opportunities when you don't even know you needed it. Right. So I think understanding that the significance of your network, not to get to a certain space, but building genuine relationships. And from that creates your network. And then later down the line, you never know when you need to help each other within our industry. So that really stood out to me.
Damn, that's funny. I was like looking at my notes. I was like, did I write that down? Like, it's funny. Like, we listen to the same conversation and get two completely different things. out of it. But I think that's a great point. Like Tim talking about basically his career path, and it kept coming back to, I met someone when I did a kick-ass job here, right? And then now 5 years down the line, I can land this job.
Yeah.
Right. That I'm, my dream job at the time.
I got that from the second time I listened to it. So it was one of those office, cycles. And mind you, the first time I listened to it, I was doing something. I was folding laundry or walking Kingsley, and I was like, no, I need to sit down and get my notepad because there's too many bars in this that I need to write down.
Yeah. What about something from like a training perspective? Anything jump out?
Yeah, he went in nicely with what we talked about. I don't know if the episode dropped, was in terms of the finding objective ways to measure success.
Mm-hmm.
So I like how he really articulated his points and standing out in the industry, essentially, if that's what you want to do. And by creating objective measures for your clients or your athletes, that literally just makes you better, because not a lot of people do it. So I like how he described like the hamster wheel. A lot of our industry in general, people come in and then they go, and they go meaning we don't really, as a whole in our industry, we don't really have those objective measures to help people understand that they are getting better.
Yeah.
So creating objective measures within our training systems gets them better, and now gets us better.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's I like the way he framed it up as like essentially us being a part, like us as in the industry that we're in, the fitness industry, especially for the general population, being a part of the problem. Right? Like when we're looking at whether like mainly like the obesity epidemic in the United States, but like we are a part of that problem, right? Or can be a part of that problem. Like thinking about some of like the big chain gyms or big chain classes, like if we're not objectively measuring anything, we're just trying to do sexy stuff that get people in the door. They come, they train for a while, they don't really see any improvements. We're not measuring anything anyway. We're just having fun. They leave, go to a different gym, rinse and repeat. And it's just the same stuff over and over and over. And that was like something I had never thought about, like our hand in this issue. And I think what he's doing at Allegiate is really cool in that they're like, we like very transparent. Like we are playing the long game.
Yeah.
Like this, like we think strength training is the way. We are going to play the long game. We're going to build over time. We're going to objectively show you how you're improving. And you'll look back a year, 2 years, 3 years from now and see a totally different person. But we're not selling anything other than that.
Yeah.
And that's like refreshing to see.
Yeah. The long game is the only game, right? The best way to get there is through objective results.
Yeah.
Mixed in with the vibes, right?
Mixed in with the vibes. Mixed in with the vibrations. I will say one thing for me that jumped out on probably like my second or third listen, like not even in the conversation that I was having with Tim, but he like very quickly made a note or made a comment about like he's still learning about the community side and trying to understand the community. Like he's been a strength coach for, I don't even know how long at this point, like 15, 20 years, right? I'll probably give him a little bit too long, but he was at Army West Point for 9 years. Like working with some high level football. He's working with some very, very high level football athletes, very high level collegiate athletes. And now he's in the private sector running a gym as a co-founder and is learning about the community side. Like we talked about on last week's show, like it's got to be objective improvement and vibrations. Like it can't be one or the other. It's not a false dichotomy. And like you probably lack in one of those areas. Right? Like get better at that. Like Tim's been in this game for a long time and he's like, oh, I'm not great at that. I'm going to get better at that area. Or again, what he does really well is hire people who are great at that area. Like he's got a team around him who helps, make sure Allegiate is successful as a company. So it's like, hey, if you stink at the community side, but you're great at the programming, you're great at the science side of things, well, how can we get more people around us who are better at the community side, and vice versa. So that for me, like that was like a big nugget that popped out on my second listen.
Yeah. And within that, going back to what you mentioned earlier in terms of like finding ways to objectively measure, he did reference what's the number one commandment we have as trainers and coaches: do no harm. Right? He says that a lot, and I think it's important to note that when we keep that top of mind, there's no reason to be doing things just to be different.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when we do things just to be different, whether it be like this cool, crazy exercise that we just made up, and we don't keep that commandment of do no harm top of mind, there's some conflicting values there. So I think always keeping that top of mind of like, these people are coming in to us, whether it be professional athletes or your general population, let's make sure we're not hurting or causing the problem, right? Or exaggerating the issue that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. No, like that's the power of heuristics, right? And it's not quote unquote correct, but it makes a lot of decisions super easy for us. Like looking at what Tim does, the general population, he said he doesn't treat it that different than athletics. Like they just sprint less. But other than that, their training's pretty similar. Like if they're doing a hypertrophy training, it's going to look pretty similar. If they're doing strength training, it's going to look pretty similar. And like they're not frequently 1 rep max and deadlifting people, 1 rep max back squatting people. You think if my goal, number one rule of thumb, do no harm. Like again, you can 1 rep max back squat as a person, like for sure. But like, will it inherently hurt you? No, but with increased intensity, there's an increased risk for injury. Like it just is what it is to a certain degree. So if I know, hey, my rule number one is no one's getting hurt in my gym, well, I know I'm not going to do that. Right? And like, you could still get strong as hell. You could still get jacked as hell and not do that. Right? Are you leaving some gains on the table? Maybe, but like keeping that rule in mind is going to keep people training consistently, which is huge. And it just makes decision making so much easier for you. If you're like, hey, yeah, you know what? That kind of goes against my rule number one. So I'm just going to find another way to get this adaptation.
Right. And an asterisk there, I don't think you're implying that doing a 1 rep max of anything is implying that they will get hurt. But I think understanding that keeping the value of making sure the people that see us are not going to get worse when they leave our class, that should give us the idea and framework of how to really, I don't like to use the word prescribe, but prescribe exercises for certain individuals, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. Right. How can we make this decision-making process easier for us when working with folks? But, trying to keep it short and wrap this up for you. If, for coaches out there listening, if there was one thing that they could walk away with, either thinking differently or have learned from this conversation, what would be that one thing you want coaches to take away?
Man, you got one thing. I don't have one thing, man. I have a lot of things. I would say don't focus on being better. Or I'm sorry, don't focus on being different. Focus on being better. And then defining what better means is something that every coach will have to define individually. But, we don't have to be different just to be different. That's a different game. You might do some crazy stuff on Instagram and get some likes, get some follows, but is that actually moving the needle in terms of what you want to do as a coach, which is get your people better? So that's just more of a question we need to ask ourselves. So yeah, being better. I think that's something I took a big takeaway that I got from this episode.
All right.
What about you? I need yours.
putting you on the hot seat quick. What does being better look like for JT?
Being better, number one, do no harm, right? That understanding that whoever comes to us for whatever goal, we have to understand that we don't want to make them worse than they came in. And worse means pain, injury, all that stuff. So I think aligning your values of who you are as a coach, and appreciating the individual in front of us, would be 1, 3, or 20 people in front of us. We have to understand that it's our responsibility to get them better, moving better, feeling better, and helping them achieve their goals.
Yeah, I like it.
What's
bro.
Yours? We need yours.
Oh, better for me? Shoot, I think honestly, I can't think about anything inside the coaching space. Not that I'm the perfect coach. I'm very, very, very far from it. I think better for me right now would be better at like the things that I feel that I'm really weak in. And from a knowledge standpoint, like when I think about like Pushin Performance and what we have going on, it's like everything outside of training. It's like business and marketing and communication and content and all that stuff. So it's like, how can I be better at getting the knowledge that we have and the conversations that we have in front of more people, and the people that we're already in front of, how can we make it more valuable for them? So when I'm thinking about better, I can't even think of a coaching related thing. My mind is just so stuck on the show.
No, that's
right
fair.
now.
I mean, I think that's, as a coach, we have to understand that's a part of our hats. That's our responsibilities too, is marketing. We are selling, regardless if wherever space you're in. Can you sell your ideas? Can you sell your passion, your values to somebody in front of you?
Right. On that note, I think for me, that was probably the biggest takeaway. And the one thing that I hope coaches take away is just Tim's mindset around business. Like, this shit is a business, man. Like, I think it's weird. Like, I think I said it, if I remember correctly, in the show in response to one of Tim's answers, but like, we act like this is like a purely selfless and altruistic thing. Like, and like, I would coach for free. Like, no, like no, like we do a lot of awesome stuff for people, get paid. Like you can get paid and help people. They don't need to compete. Like, yeah, I love helping people. Love it. Right. It gives me energy. It genuinely makes me feel good. Right. It's like one of my passions in life, but also being broke sucks. Like, there's no way around it, right? Like, so I just like Tim's mindset when he was the head strength coach for Army, like looking around, like there's not a lot. Like, I don't, how much more time do I have in this game? What if the head coach gets fired? What am I to do? Like, no, I'm going to go out. I'm going to bet on myself. I'm going to set up something that's going to be, way more stable from a financial standpoint, that gives me basically infinite growth. Like, thinking about the ceiling of earning on your role, the ceiling of influence on your current role. Like, for me, that was something that I was excited even going into the show to talk to Tim about, because he's very open about that aspect of the field, and a lot of people aren't. So I that was like huge for me, is like, how can we as a field be better about having this conversation, one, and then two, be better about arming young professionals entering our field with the information and the ability to be financially stable, to set themselves up for success financially, and then to maximize their earning power and potential, no matter what aspect of the field they're in, whether it's college, whether it's pro, whether it's private, whether it's content, whatever. Like, how can we maximize our earning potential, and get paid? I will never ever discourage someone from getting the bag. So even Seaman, get the bag, King. So it's that for me. If you could just like take that mindset and just like run with it, go down that rabbit hole. And Tim does have more content. We'll post his website in the show notes, but Tim does have more content on that area as well.
Well said. Well said. X out that Seaman part. No, I'm just messing. I like Seaman, man.
I need I do need, just real quick, I do need to make an amendment to what I said about David Weck earlier. He's been on a weird posting rampage. I think he is David Weck. I just would like to walk
Wait,
back
why?
some of the things I said.
What'd he do?
Man's out of control.
What'd he do?
I can't explain. I can't explain on here the things that he's done.
He's just flourishing in his ideas, you know, his ideation movement, if you will.
It's like he just be saying stuff, and then it's just like, whoa, what does that have to do with anything?
I'm just afraid if I'm at a gym, in the same gym he's in, he's gonna whack me with like an SSB bar on his back, bro. Like, come on.
Mess around and just like catch a Bosu ball to the throat.
Let's get him on here. Let's get David Weck and Dr. Seedman, and we're gonna have a great conversation. I'll tell you that.
Listen, if anyone knows David Weck or Joel Seaman,
please
tell them to come on the show. We will. I mean, we'll interview anybody who's in the coaching space. So,
with all due respect, I want to peek in that little brain of yours. I'd
be like, What's wrong with you?
We'll have a good conversation, man. They got some good stuff.
Then you'd be like, what Phil means by that is, how did you develop your coaching philosophy?
Yeah. Come on, Phil. Come on.
God damn it, Phil. Come on. All right,
Mike.
All right. Let's wrap it up. JT, where can people find you?
On Instagram, coachjt.mp3.
You can find me on IG at Nashville. You can find the show on Instagram and YouTube at Pushin Performance. No G. You can find Tim at phpodcast.com. It linked in the show notes. I can personally attest some awesome information on there. I definitely recommend checking out his podcast, checking out some of his free content. But his courses, his books, some great stuff in there. And as always, if you love the show love how you supposed to. Give us a 5-star review, give us a little rating in there, share it with a coach who you think could level up, and we'll catch you all next time.
Tim, thank you. We'll get you on part 2 if you're willing. I'll be there this time. Appreciate it.
Part 2 would go crazy.
My feelings burning in they heat, bro. Get a lot, put my